The word of the week this week is 3 words with a bonus word. So technically, I guess that's 4 words of the week in 1 week. So we're going to do a month's worth of words of the week in 1 day. How's that sound? We are taking a look at 3 inseparable words in their context in Titus chapter 1, verse 10. So Titus is a letter from Paul to his man in Crete, Titus. And much of the letter is about Titus's task of appointing elders in the young churches in Crete. And there are a lot of qualifications that Paul lists out, but it's important for us to talk about the disqualifications, the reason that Paul feels so strongly that there need to be a particular kind of elders in place in the churches in Crete. So before we get to our list of 3 words and our bonus word, let's take a look at the verse immediately preceding it as sort of the cap off of, or a summation of some of the qualities of these elders. This is Titus 1, verse 9 from the ESV. He must hold firm to the trustworthy word as taught, so that he may be able to give instruction in sound doctrine and also to rebuke those who contradict it. So, the elders have to be doctrinally sound. Why do they need to be doctrinally sound? In order that they can be teachers of sound doctrine and also rebukers of those who would corrupt doctrine, who would bring unsound doctrine to the table. So that brings us to our verse that contains our words of the week. This is Titus chapter 1, verse 10, again from the ESV. For there are many who are insubordinate, empty talkers, and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision party. It's interesting that the ESV calls them the circumcision party to differentiate them from all Judaism, from all circumcised men. That he wants Titus to know, or the ESV wants you to know, that by using that word, the circumcision, they're talking about within the young church, Jewish converts who see themselves a little differently than they see the Gentile converts. And we'll come back to that in just a moment. So, what is common in this group? Being insubordinate, empty talkers, and deceivers. These are the disqualifiers. But first, let's look at the bonus word in its phrase. Malista hoi ek tes peripatomes. So especially, malista, especially, hoi, those, the ones, ek tes peritomes, of the circumcision. Especially those of the circumcision. So our bonus word this week is malista. Malista is a superlative of the adverb mala, and from mala we get the more common word, the word that we see a lot in the New Testament, malon. Mu, alpha, lambda, omicron, nu, malon. So malon is more than or to a greater degree. This is the superlative, especially, particularly. So Paul tells Titus there's people out there who are insubordinate, empty talkers, and deceivers, particularly, especially from among the circumcision, from that group, the Jewish converts in the early church. So people who share these 3 characteristics are particularly found in that group. Why? Because Jews who became Christians in the early church had a propensity to continue to hold to Jewish teachings. So if you see the Messiah, the Jewish Messiah, as a continuation of your religion that has been a part of your life for generations and generations, it's easy for you to say, I accept that Jesus is the Messiah, but I also believe that I have to circumcise my sons, remain kosher in my diet, no cheeseburgers, got to keep the dairy and the meat separate, have to observe certain ritual washings and observe certain high feasts each year, attend these festivals, practice the practices of these holidays, sleep in a booth during tabernacles, etc., etc. So they're advocating for Jesus plus Judaism as the gospel. And Paul comes along and he says that this represents a problem. This represents a major problem. They also tend to look at Gentile converts as sort of second-class Christians, latecomers. So if you're a Jew who's been waiting for the Messiah your whole life, as have your ancestors all the way back to the days of Moses, you see these Gentiles who come along as kind of hangers-on. So this presents a problem in the young church. The problem is that their influence on the church, because they tend to know more than the Gentile converts, they know more because this is part of their history, they have more influence and they exercise that influence in, whether it be an intentional or unintentional way, a pernicious influence. So Paul says, it's important for you to select elders in these churches. The elders have to be doctrinally sound so they can teach sound doctrine, and also so that they can rebuke people who are teaching unsound doctrine. What kind of people? He told us, those who are insubordinate, empty talkers, and deceivers. Let's look at our 3 words of the week. So the first one, anapotaktoi. Anapotaktoi is a plural noun, and it comes from, this doesn't sound like it when I say it at first, but it comes from hupotage, submission. This is the negated form, but now it's a plural noun, the negated form of the word submission. What's the opposite of submission? Non-submission, anti-submission, insubordination. These are those who are rebellious, who don't think themselves subject to rules. They're independent, above authority. How so? Well, they think themselves superior to the Gentile converts. So here, in a church that is wholly dependent on the merits of Christ and not on self, some of the folks think they're better than other folks because of their Jewish background versus their Gentile background. They don't see themselves as submissive. They see themselves as, at least in regard to some of the other church members, as superior. They are insubordinate. Interestingly, and when we look at this first word of the week, and let me say it again, anapotaktoi, when Paul uses it, it's you can tell in the context that it's almost always talking about insubordination. They won't yield. They see themselves as being authorities. Okay? So that's our first word, and that's the first problem. There are some from among, particularly from among the circumcision group, who won't submit themselves. They see themselves as superior. They want to be an authority, not be under authority. The next word, mataiologoi, comes from mataios, which is empty, vain, fruitless, useless, powerless, and logos, word, right? So when we turn that into a substantive, it's people whose words are empty, people who are, the theological dictionary of the New Testament says of this word that they are empty prattlers. So they talk a lot, but the words are without content. The words are empty words. Powerless words. How so? Well, there's much talk from this part of the group about the importance of the observance of dietary restrictions and ritual washings and ceremonies, etc., etc. And that results in the last word. The last word is it makes them phrenapatai. It makes them deceivers or misleaders. By holding themselves above the other new Christians, by advocating for things as essential that are not essential, they are deceiving believers with a Jesus plus gospel. What do I mean by that? So Remember, Paul says, when I knew I was coming to see you, I determined to know nothing among you except Christ and him crucified. This is all about Jesus. But now these folks, particularly from the circumcision, are saying, yes, obviously we're trusting in the Messiah, we're trusting in the substitutionary sacrifice of Christ on our behalf, but you also have to eat kosher. But you also have to circumcise your sons. But you also have to fast on the Day of Atonement. But you also have to practice washing and cleansing for your wives after their monthly period. You also have to do all these things. You have to keep the whole of the law plus trust in Jesus. And that winds up making the gospel not about the sufficiency of Christ, but about the benefits of Christ added to your efforts. That is deceiving from Paul's perspective. So how does this become a problem? It becomes a problem because a gospel of dependence on Jesus plus some stuff that you do is no gospel at all. It's no good news at all. It turns it into your merit merged with his merit. And if you had the merit, if you could pull off the meritocracy and put yourself in front of God as just and right on any level without the full sufficiency of Christ's righteousness on your behalf, then there would be no need for a gospel. You would have to do it yourself. That's always Paul's theology. You would have to do this yourself. But you can't. For all of sin, there is no difference. For all of sin fall short of the glory of God. But thanks be to God, we have this offering of righteousness from God through Christ that makes the unrighteous righteous in his eyes, etc., etc. You know all that stuff. But this is what we're up against on Crete from Paul's letter to Titus. He says you need to pick elders who are sound in doctrine, who can teach sound doctrine, and who can rebuke, because there are some, especially from the circumcision, who are, what are they? They are insubordinate. They don't think themselves being the same as everybody else in the church. They think of themselves as a higher class of Christ followers. They are empty talkers because they're adding things to the gospel that are as though they're essential, that are not. You need to have Jesus plus a kosher diet, circumcision, etc., Sabbath keeping, the whole thing. And as a result, they're deceiving new believers. They're making them think that this is about Jesus plus something else. The gospel is not about Jesus plus. It's about Jesus from beginning to end, out of faith into faith, by faith from first to last, right? That's what we know from Paul's writings. Otherwise, if we don't have those kind of elders on Crete, we're going to be stuck with the influence of the insubordinate, empty prattlers and deceivers. We'll have people believing in the corrupted gospel of Jesus plus. So our 3 words of the week, anapakatoi, mataiologoi, and phrenapatai. They are what? They are insubordinate, empty talkers, and deceivers. The remedy is sound doctrine in the hands of trustworthy people who can teach, who live sound doctrine, who teach sound doctrine, and who correct unsound doctrine. 3 words of the week plus a bonus. What was the bonus? Malista, especially, particularly. I hope you enjoyed that, and if so, please like, share, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And until next time, Kar Sky Reina Humi, grace and peace to you.